With all its ostensible progressiveness and wokeness, one would think Australia's taxpayer-funded broadcaster, the ABC, is a haven for diversity, equity and inclusion. But as we often see with other groups and individuals who claim the moral high ground, behind closed doors, there's trouble in paradise. Yes, dear listener, the ABC is racist, or at least has been accused of being racist by dozens, hundreds of its employees. ABC Review finds racism within broadcaster. Aboriginal former ABC presenter not surprised by reports of widespread racism at national broadcaster. It even made the international news, albeit CNN. Australian national broadcaster finds systemic racism in workplace. Basically, an independent review was conducted titled Listen Loudly, Act Strongly, led by Indigenous lawyer Terri Janke. The report spoke to 120 current and former ABC staff, 38 of which identified as First Nations, 71 as called, culturally and linguistically diverse, and 11 advocates or allies. 86 were women, while only 30 were men, with the remainder being non-binary, or preferring not to say. Interestingly, where possible, group forums and individual meetings were offered, such as First Nations only, called only, and women only. See, that's how you fight racism. You separate everybody into their individual identity groups. There's a word for that. Separating everybody into particular categories. I forget what it's called. In the report, they state, it is noted that the lawyers on the review team are all women. There was one man on the review team. While a men-only option for consultations was provided, this was not selected by any of the participants. In the key themes section, they state, almost all participants who identified as First Nations or called described experiencing racism in the workplace. Only one called participant stated that they did not experience racism in the workplace. I'd be interested, did anybody actually get called a slur? Was the racism so overt that any reasonable person viewing it would say, yes, that's racism? Or was it more feelings were hurt and the stated explanation was racism, when perhaps it wasn't? I don't know, I'm just asking. Here are some of the participants' quotes. The most racism I have experienced in my life has been at the ABC. That's interesting, because the ABC prides itself on being anti-racist. If the ABC is the most racist place in the world, God help the rest of Australia. We must all be a bunch of raving Ku Klux Klan members. More quotes. Because of the colour of my skin, I was seen as less than. Evidence, please. Simply feeling it or saying it does not make it true. There is absolute, undeniable racist culture at the ABC. Again, proof please. Structural racism, microaggressions. Every Indigenous staff member experiences one form or another of racism on a daily basis. Okay, if this is honestly true, this is the worst place in the world to work for. When asked what they were doing in the building by a colleague, I'm pretty sure no one else gets asked on that floor. You need 3 security passes to get to that floor, and they were worried a black fella was there. Oh yes, I've never been stopped by security before. As a white fella, I can walk into any building I want to. Again, they use language like, I'm pretty sure. It's not evidence, it's just one's feelings. Of course, money comes into it, the alleged pay gap. I'm by far significantly underpaid. I see this as ABC's pattern of underpaying indigeneity, seeing it as a detractor rather than an asset. Again, how do you possibly prove this? Unless there's a policy written down somewhere saying, we pay Aboriginal people less than white people, then this is just speculation, is it not? And as I suspected earlier on, nobody's overtly attacking you or bullying you, but it is kind of this atmospheric feeling of lack of safety, and that is very, very hard to put down on paper in black and white. Again, a feeling of racism. It's not overt, it's just one's feeling. The smoking gun, those microaggressions chip away and it can be worse than large issues of racism. Again, they use the word microaggressions. Luckily, the lawyers have provided us with a glossary. Microaggressions refers to the casual or subtle expressions that perpetuate racist stereotypes and ideas. An example of a microaggression might be commenting on how well a person of African heritage speaks English, or repeatedly mispronouncing someone's name, despite being corrected. I speak Chinese. Here's a Chinese name. 99 English speakers out of 100 are going to pronounce this guy's name wrong. Even if you're corrected multiple times, it's pronounced Zhou Haoran, and I'm probably not even saying it 100% correct. This is not racism. This is just lack of Chinese language ability. Unless you grow up in China or have studied Chinese extensively, you're going to get this wrong repeatedly. Repeatedly mispronouncing someone's name, especially a name of non-Western origin, I would say is almost certainly not a microaggression or racist in any way. Last one, I struggle with the idea that I have to leave myself at the door. That metaphorical door was built by and for middle-class white men. And that's what this is all about, right? Blaming the white man. I could go on, but this report is 171 pages long. I'm not joking. When people are struggling to find a house to live, taxpayer money is being used to commission reports on how the ABC is racist. Despite mostly anecdotal evidence presented in the report, of course the ABC's head white man, David Anderson, apologised for the horrible racist culture at the ABC, stating, "On behalf of everyone at the ABC, I am sorry for any and all racist behaviour and past harms experienced by our Indigenous and called employees, either currently or formerly employed. We all need to do better for our colleagues by remaining vigilant against racism or discrimination of any kind in our workplace." Interestingly, star Indigenous presenter Tony Armstrong, who has since resigned from ABC News Breakfast, was called out by the ABC's own Media Watch program for moonlighting as an NRMA insurance voiceover man. Specifically, she said, "There are strict rules around ABC staff doing external work, and the rules get tighter the more famous you are, with the ABC stipulating that any external work by a high-profile presenter is very high risk. It's a shame this moonlighting at the expense of the ABC's integrity is what we're talking about in his final week on the news breakfast couch." Personally, I don't care what the guy does. If he wants to make some extra money on the side, so be it, but obviously he wasn't keen on telling his employer about it. Actually, it was completely unapproved what he did. Now, is this an example of structural racism? Of course not. He broke the rules, and he's getting called out for it. Obviously, it's got nothing to do with race. Look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the ABC is a godforsaken racist hellhole. But from the evidence I've seen, a lot of it is just hearsay and anecdotal at best. I'm not saying people aren't being treated badly over at the ABC, or their feelings aren't being hurt, but perhaps it's got nothing to do with race.